once in a while, a film comes along whose inexplicable popularity sort of restores your faith in the tastes of humanity, if only temporary. And I think about like Mad Max Fury Road or even like Oppenheimer earlier this year, like billion-dollar movies. Why? Just because for a split second the public decided to have a sense of taste. And this is where Godzilla Minus One enters. Because right now we have Apple's Monarch series, which continues to be an absolute bore on the small screen. And the entire internet is clowning on the trailer for Godzilla X Kong: A New Empire. And then you have Godzilla Minus One, which is accomplishing such a rare thing pretty quietly at that in theaters. And it's proving that foreign language films can crush at the US box office. It's proving that you can work within the confines of a franchise and still, differentiate yourself. And it's proving that you can indeed have endearing characters in this subgenre in which people often complain about cardboard cutout human protagonists. And this film has accomplished a rare balancing act of making the so-called slow scenes of the movie as compelling as the massive set pieces of destruction. And I found Godzilla Minus One to not only be one of the best Godzilla films, but also one of the best films of 2023. Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, and that is Chuck, and this is episode 33. Let me tell you, folks, the king is back. Not Elvis, not Kong, but Godzilla has made landfall in these here United States, and he is here to conquer both the box office and the critical consensus. A review of Godzilla Minus One will be coming up a little bit later in the show, but first up, we've got a pretty substantial news story to cover, a very meaty watch list, and as always, we're going to have our mentionables bringing up the tail end of the show. Please like and subscribe if you like what we're doing here on the channel. And for a little bit of housekeeping this week. Last week, we had originally announced our featured review as Poor Things. And while that was our intention, sometimes we're at the mercy of films that release in sort of our geographical area, and sometimes we're at the mercy of how fickle these movie studios are with their release dates. I'm looking at you, Fox Searchlight, or just Searchlight at this point, I guess.
Bastards.
But the short version is Poor Things was originally supposed to release wide this past Friday, and is suddenly only in limited release. It's kind of one of those LA and New York type situations. So now that film is going to be coming out 3 days before Christmas across the United States. And I'm sure that we'll have some sort of coverage around that movie around that time. But yeah, so that's the situation. That's why we're doing Godzilla. And yeah, that's pretty much that. And then as far as a little bit more housekeeping, it's been 2 weeks since we last convened, and we have a new mini-sode on the channel. And this one was done by Chuck, so Chuck, why don't you take it away with that?
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, this was something that has been like on our dock in some shape or form for like 2 years. Because I sat down with my wife, my then girlfriend, to, just like, ooh, I want to share this show I love with you called Utopia. It's crazy. And it's on Amazon Prime, and I think, oh, everything's going to be cool. I just have to press play and watch this thing. And within the first scene, I was like pausing and going, what the fuck? Am I crazy? Because a very specific thing was missing from it. And then I did some researching and found that a whole lot of things were missing from the streaming version of the first season. And that sent me down a rabbit hole trying to find out why. And the answer why was fairly interesting, if not just a little bit, just how the sausage is made. This is what happens when you market things made in one country to another, and the sensibilities are different, or the requirements are different. So check that out if you want to find out why you should pirate Utopia, unless you happen to live in Germany, where they sell Blu-rays of both seasons in their original Channel 4 pristine condition. It's been like I initially when I put it up there, I was like, oh, this isn't tracking very well. Single digit views after a day, head sweats. But everyone kind of came out, and there's been a lot of really encouraging comments, and people who have been subscribing as a result of it. So welcome. This is the kind of thing we do. We have very niche topics we like to talk about sometimes, and I'm glad that there are people out there who also, agree that Utopia is a special show that more people should watch. You still haven't seen it, have you? The original
just
one.
just the Amazon version, and I've always meant to watch it, and yeah, I need to put it up higher up on my priorities list, because the sort of all of the hullabaloo about this show, as far as how like controversial it was. I remember back in the day when it like first came out, and how big it was, as far as in like the sort of underground channels of the film scene. And so yeah, I need to watch it.
Yeah, that first season, the third episode of the first season is a doozy, for people who, are, kind of triggered easily. And that's partially why it was so controversial. Sandy Hook occurred shortly after that episode aired, and that fundamentally sealed the death of the show, because they had the second season already ordered. It was already in production, and then quietly it was just put out to pasture and into the arms of David Fincher, who couldn't get HBO to play ball, which is why we got the Gillian Flynn version from Amazon instead. And that's a story all into itself. But really what we need to talk about next is all of the happenings in the, I guess this is like the precede to award season. All of the critics and all the like indie minded awards kind of had their shows. And what did we find out as those nominations and statues were handed out?
Yeah, so this past week there was 4 film organizations that published their sort of best of 2023 winners. And I think it's kind of a fun thing to look at, not only to sort of compare where everybody's tastes lie, but these things can be a predictor of, the next big award season. And just to give a tiny bit of background on these 4 organizations, it was the Gotham Awards, which are sort of the first ones usually out of the gate every year, and typically they skew pretty independent. In years past they had a rule that you had to have a budget under $35 million to qualify, but they actually got rid of that this year. And so they've sort of abandoned all pretense of being a independent award show. They literally have an award sponsored by Cadillac this year, so it's kind of it's okay, you're just dropping the whole pretense here. And so there's that place. There's the New York Film Critic Awards, which are especially known as a predictor for the Oscars. Their best film winner has correlated with the best picture winner 43% of the time, which is pretty big odds, or pretty good odds. And then we have the Independent Spirit Awards, which are probably the most concerned about appearing to sort of favor indie film. They still have a budgetary restriction in place, unlike the Gotham Awards. And then there's the National Board of Review, which is a New York collective of filmmakers, journalists, and academics. So all 4 of these organizations publish their sort of awards. And I don't know, just looking over everything, I had said, we kind of wanted to point out some things that we agree with, some things we disagree with, some trends. What was your sort of initial impressions?
The fact that Past Lives actually had some staying power in people's minds, because that came out earlier in the year, and I heard a lot of really good things about it, and it's on my to watch list. You're right up there with a lot of these other ones. But I am a little disappointed that something as pedestrian sounding as Anatomy of a Fall is doing so well as far as a foreign language film is concerned, because it just doesn't sound substantial to me. It's soapy. That should have been an HBO Max series, you know what I mean? But otherwise, yeah, it's a lot of what is happening is what I expected to happen. But why the fuck is that reality winner movie being nominated for anything?
Yeah, that was I put that under my I had a category in our doc labeled dumb shit, and that was one of the things that I put under there because yeah, I think they were just struggling to come up with, more independent features to stick on their nominees list for that one. Yeah, that one was really strange, I thought. And then the other one that was really strange was Jamie Foxx got a Best Actor nom for They Cloned Tyrone. That was yeah. Mhm. Yeah, they probably just wanted to throw him a bone because he almost died this year of some mysterious illness or something. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, so that was kind of dumb. But yeah, what my biggest takeaway, I think, with this was I think come award season, come like actual award seasons when the more populist award shows release their noms and stuff, this is going to come down to Killers of the Flower Moon versus Past Lives, I think pretty much everywhere. With sort of Oppenheimer being the one sort of, um, I don't know, I guess the bringing up the rear, I guess, because Oppenheimer what really wasn't eligible to be nominated for 2 out of 4 of these organizations' awards, but I do think it is going to fare really really well with like the Oscars and the Golden Globes. So I think they're going to have he's going to have to duke it out with Scorsese probably. Yeah. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, it's like they're just in, like a 3.5 hour movie. There really just isn't enough special effects there, other than what you mentioned. And so that would be my guess. And um, as as amazing as they were, especially when you consider that they did a lot of that stuff sort of practically and using really really strange methods. There just probably wasn't enough there. It wasn't showy enough, I guess, is probably what it would come down to. Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, he's currently like sort of the favorite, and especially in the award, a couple of these organizations, they no longer do gendered acting noms, and so he is sort of the favorite now. And in the awards that are still gendered, I think it's gonna come down to him for the actor nom or supporting actor nom, and then Divine Joy Randolph for the actress nom. And that's something I'll talk about in a little bit too. Yeah. Oh, just coming around. Oh. But- yes. Mm. Uh, Adam Driver. Yeah. 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 I am, yeah. I don't think so. I think at this point, I think that's been put to rest a little bit at this point, because of how well the movie turned out. I think if it was a worse movie, it probably would have hampered it a little bit more. But what I think happened there with both of those, Ferrari and Maestro, is they're a little too like conventional biopicky for these particular organizations. I think they will both fare better with like the Oscars and the Globes. But yeah, they're just a little too conventional for, these the film critics of New York and the United States,
Because yeah, because these are
So,
the blessed people who get to see everything right away. Because I've been seeing so many ads for Poor Things, it makes me so pissed that it's not available to me because they are going out of their way. And another dumb shit that you mentioned. Why is that an international movie? It is in English, is it not?
yes, it is in English, and I mean it's largely US based cast. I think some of it was filmed in the United States, and yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I think it pretty much comes down to Yorgos Lanthimos not being American, but a lot of the people involved with that movie are American. I think the writer was American, and yeah, I don't quite understand that one getting nominated for international.
It's kind of scuzzy. Like whatever the
Yeah.
reasoning, it's kind of scuzzy. I don't agree with it.
And then as far as, stuff that I liked seeing, between these four lists of nominees, I did want to mention Gotham Awards nominated Michelle Garza Cervera for, if people remember way back towards the beginning of this year, who's Sarah the Bone Woman. She
Movie
got
ruled.
nominated for, yeah, that movie was really good. And so she got nominated for Breakthrough Director. So that's nice to see. And then um, I personally liked Dead Ringers not being completely forgotten. And then also, I got to point out that the National Board of Review has a category for stunts, which I think is really
Yeah.
cool. And so, John Wick 4 won for that award this year for them.
Well
And
deserved.
so, yeah, that's totally cool.
Shout out to the first movie we reviewed as Theater and Stream right there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and
That's right.
it probably has it locked down for the foreseeable future if they resurrect its corpse for the sequels like they've been threatening us with. Because
Yeah.
yeah, the action sequences in that are still ringing in my eyes a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely amazing. Yeah, and then I gotta also shout out 2 out of 4 of these organizations do honor television, and so when it comes to TV, we'll eventually get the Emmy noms and we'll get the Golden Globe noms, and so I think this year it's pretty much gonna come down to a death match between The Last of Us and Beef is probably how it's gonna
God.
shake out.
Both,
And that's kind
both
of
of those shows are just they diminished so much for me after the fact. I barely think about them.
yeah.
So it's funny to
Yeah.
me that they're the front runners.
It is, yeah. I mean, I think The Last of Us was pretty mid, in my opinion. I think Beef has a little bit more staying power. But yeah, I don't know I mean, what else would you say deserves to be nominated other than the obvious? I mean, the big obvious one is Succession, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Is there anything else in your mind that stands out as something, as far as TV that should have been nominated?
I don't know, because that's the thing. It's like a lot of the shows that I that like are pretty high up for me right now, like Murder at the End of the World and the new season of Fargo. They're midstream, so they probably can't be considered for these kinds of things. Until next year. Is that how it works?
I believe so. I think it's for a lot of these, you have to have had the entire season premiere in the year. So
Yeah.
the entire season of Fargo would have had to have premiered in 2023.
Gotcha. And that,
Yeah.
yeah. So they just missed the cut, but otherwise, yeah, like it's got to be Succession. even though
Yeah.
like it was, even though I don't know, as far as within that its own series, it's maybe not the best season of that show ever, but
Mhm.
nothing captivated me more on television this year than that. So I guess that's where I hold my hat.
Yeah, same. I think that I think it just, I don't know if it just alienated too many people with the ending. I thought by this point people would have gotten over that by now, or they would have sort of been opened up to the genius of that, like say like Sopranos, when
Yeah.
Sopranos first ended and people were like, fuck this ending sucks. But people have warmed up to that ending over time, and I think people still will with Succession, but I don't know if enough time has passed.
It's I'd rather have fine wine, or at least like appreciate fine wine for what it is. But I understand that
Mhm.
other people's palates may not have acclimated to it yet, and that's kind of what's going on here. It's like when your parent gives you beer for the first time when you're like 8 years old, just to be like, oh, you want to try it, and like you'll like it when you grow up. And I think some people just need to grow up a little bit. Because if you're ready to move on to the watch list,
Yes. Yeah.
I did a lot of growing up between when I saw the original Good Burger and the sequel that no one asked for. But I briefly just want to say in some quick hits here, this is probably the most faithful sequel that has ever been done. And this is not fine art. This is exactly what it is. If you were a Nick at Night kid, what the heck happened? It didn't put it all in there. But anyway, yeah, Good Burger. It was awesome. Good Burger ruled. And I guess I don't even have the trailer for the other thing I was going to talk about. I blame Canva. I'm still in freaking customer support with those assholes because their app does not work. I can't download shit. So I was going to tell you, watch Good Burger. Good Burger Part 2. Everyone comes back. Everyone that you loved returns in some form, even if it's just for a cameo. If you care about like modern day celebrity cameos, everyone from Rob Gronkowski to Kai Cenat shows up. But yeah,
Everyone but Coolio.
everyone but Coolio makes a return, but it's worth it. Really good. What was not really good, what was an example of the worst kind of sequel that could ever be delivered to people, is Exorcist Believer. Like, I hate David Gordon Green. Like, I legitimately do. I do not trust him anymore. And I don't trust anyone who are his writing partners. Because this was the most decrepit and lame version of what an Exorcist movie could be. It just made me so sad that we didn't have, like, we have the original, but we have people who claim that they love the original making shit like this and acting like they're doing something special and nice when, like, it is laughable. Like, I had to, like, hold back snickers throughout the movie because I was just like, oh, Jesus, oh, God, really? Ugh. And I'm not even talking about the lines that everyone knows about, like the patriarchy moment. It's all bad. It is, like, the collective effort of everyone involved was so misguided. And what it does to, like, the continuity is also pretty infuriating, just in terms of, like, how you go from that first movie, or even, like, I don't even think they acknowledge the second, like, I think it's solely just, like, jumping from that first to this one. And by God, I hope they don't make any fucking more. It just should not happen.
So let me ask you this. Is it like, because one of the things that I sort of got a little bit of, weird enjoyment out of with the Halloween movies, except for the first one. I thought the first David Gordon Green Halloween was genuinely
Yes,
good, but the other
yeah.
two are trash. But, is it at least like funny in like a, this is so bad it's funny way? Because one of the things that I enjoyed about watching those latter Halloween
That's true.
movies
Yeah.
was how, like, awfully awful they were, that they were funny, like like the whole hospital scene in like the second one, like, evil dies tonight.
Yeah.
Evil dies tonight. And so is there like any enjoyment to be gained out of this?
Not really, not for me,
Okay.
because like I was just stewing the whole time. I was like, really, you're gonna do this? Ugh, like, I don't know. The part that like made me the most upset was when they get Ellen Bernstein's character back into it. They get McNeil back in it, and she's like sitting there And like, keep in mind that this is a Catholic horror movie, but then we're just gonna syncrete all this new agey white woman bullshit into it and act like this is how you really defeat Pazuzu. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, because we have the Creole and we have voodoo, we have a evangelical preacher involved, and somehow that's gonna make a fucking difference. I was just like, this is stupid. This is absurdly stupid, and it's hilarious watching a filmmaker take himself that seriously. Like, that dude is so lost in his sauce, and I don't know. Like, I was more scared of his character in Bones and All than anything he did in that movie. Like, that was just sinister. Yeah. And I also found this next movie pretty sinister, because while I was editing, I was able to watch May, December, and I'm really fucking glad I did. Because, like, I think in the doc you kind of described it as elevated trash, and that couldn't be more of a compliment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, this is May, December, which is roughly based on the story of Mary Kay Letourneau. If people remember that, it was a teacher who had sex with one of her students, went to prison, and then went on to have a relationship with him after she got out of prison. And in the film, the whole movie is kind of through the lens of an actress played by Natalie Portman, who is researching for a role in this movie that is being made about this woman. And yeah, like I said, I mean, this script could have easily have been like a Lifetime movie if it just had been like picked up by that TV channel, but it was instead, I guess, found by Todd Haynes and Natalie Portman. She is a producer on the movie, and it's sort of, elevated trash is how I described it, because the acting performances are immaculate, and you know, the directing is amazing, but then like the whole movie has this weird vibe because of things like the music, which is like this like piano score of somebody just pounding on the lower half of a piano, like the darkest sounding keys of a piano, and just these really weirdly like shot scenes where it looks like an early 2000s movie where, you know, everything's in like soft focus, and the sun, very much like the sun glints off every surface, and there's like shots of butterflies flying, and it's like, it's so strange. And so that's kind of how I saw the movie. But what did you think?
That score was so bizarre, and I needed to find out more about it. So the wiki page was helpful, because apparently they were just using the music from the movie The Go-Between, and as a temp score on set and while they were editing, and then everyone was just like, hey, why don't we just use this? So the composer for the movie just reorchestrated it. So that's why it's so like jarring, because it's literally from a different movie from a different era. And but they're similar in kind of in subject matter, because they're both about, you know, illicit liaisons and the consequences of them. And there's just such a sinister edge to like the way that like every like scene kind of plays out. There's always everything. There's something always unspoken, and there's always something else that like especially with god dang it, the mayor, Leanne Moore. What's I'm blanking on her name. I feel like an idiot right now. I have no name retention. Julianne Moore. Julianne Moore. Like, her character, whenever she says something, like every awful mother that you know, she's actually like saying something else. And you know it. You especially the children, they're always translating what she's really saying and internalizing it. And that's what makes this movie work more than Lifetime trash, because it lets scenes breathe and lets moments breathe, and the actors can actually like put something else into it besides just reading lines. So it's very finely and delicately made, and then I'm just left feeling completely gross afterwards, just because of how awful pretty much everyone in the movie is, as far as like the people that they are and the choices they make, that they all kind of live beyond morality. The actress herself, because she's just she is opening herself up to the darkness because she's such a pure artist in some way. But that ending was so fucking sinister.
Oh yeah, yeah. When she's making the movie, like,
Yeah.
and it's, against, yeah. I found, Portman to me was the most sinister thing about this movie, because she's playing this actress that is basically known for, she wants to be taken more seriously in her career. She's known for being in sort of like a Grey's Anatomy type show, like basically like just trash TV. And this movie is trying to say something, I think, about the actors, the process of actors, and how it can be exploitative, where, she is basically, inserting herself into these people's lives, and she's picking apart their lives. She's taking the stuff she wants to take, and she's leaving the stuff she doesn't want to take. And she is, there's just a degree of exploitation there, where she's pilfering their lives, basically, for the most like scintillating details. And she says that she's going to do right by them, but in the end it's like all for naught, because she does just end up making this trash Lifetime movie where it basically looks like a porno film, when they show the set and what they're making. And so I found her to be incredibly sinister, and just completely like moralless. She had no morals. She, the scene where she has sex with Charles Melton's character to basically like get more into the role, and then she immediately looks at like the note afterwards, and it's just so fucked up.
Yeah, and that's what I found bizarre. It's like, why are, like, I don't, like, it just seems like such a strange move, especially since she's a producer on the movie. It's like, this is an indictment of the process. It's an indictment of the profession, to a degree, especially method acting, I guess. Because these people that she's not treating them like actual human beings. They are just they are just drama to be mined. She's a drama miner, and then she gets the jewel at the end, which is her performance. By putting all of their struggles and neuroses under pressure, like so to speak, and the end result. Yeah, it's like, what is it in service of? You're just making a trash TV movie, and you're acting like you're doing something special here. But I guess actors are just as deluded as the people that they get their inspiration from sometimes. I don't know, so I was kind of shocked by, I guess, the nuance and the willingness to do that. But I'm sitting here and going, like, how many times has she actually done this? You know what I mean? Like, she's done biopics before, Natalie Portman. Like, she was Jackie O, for crying out loud, and while she maybe didn't like interview her, I think she was long dead before that movie got made, she still probably spent a lot of time researching and internalizing that person and going through this exact process. It just might not have been so invasive and despicable as it gets in this movie.
Yeah, and I did want to mention, you had earlier in the episode mentioned it, but yeah, Charles Melton, I do think he is sort of deserving of all the praise he's getting. It's mostly a quiet performance, but then he sort of he gets a couple of scenes towards the end of the movie where he's really sort of let loose, as far as letting his acting sort of fly, basically. And I just love the scene where he like tries smoking weed for the first time with his son, and oh god, that was just excruciating and just like, insane.
And his character was the one I focused on the most, because ultimately it's about what was done to him. And in this, like, I don't know, like, since the South Park explored this like more eloquently than anyone with Miss Teacher Bangs a Boy, which was also inspired by Mary Kay Letourneau. But yeah, that's the reaction that there is an epidemic of female educators doing this exact same kind of thing in the world today. And for some reason, we're just supposed to look at what happened with these two and somehow think that something beautiful happened. And we know how the real story worked out. And I guess I appreciated the fact that the script, chose to actually take a moral stance on what happened to that guy. Because the way that he's just mommed by his supposed wife throughout it, just made my skin crawl. and you could just see how, yeah, it's like he was still just getting ordered around by mommy, even though he's supposed to be a grown adult with 3 kids, of college age. Like it's bonkers, and it's really fucked up. But that's what we're here for. We're here for the fucked up, and it helps make the medicine go down when it's just bubblegum trash. And speaking of bubblegum trash, I watched Faraway Downs, which was a re-edit of Australia, the film by Baz Luhrmann, that I looked at when I heard the news, and I was like, this is wholly unnecessary. Nobody wants this. But Baz wanted it, god damn it. And he wanted, golly, I am really mad at Canva right now because they've flubbed it up again. Bear with me here while I just need something playing while I talk about it.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, while you're doing that,
yeah.
One thing to sort of lead into this review, I want to know, like, is it strange watching something that is like ostensibly new in the year 2023, but everything looks like it was filmed in the like late 2000s, and all of the people look like they were their ages from the late 2000s? Mm-hmm. Is there some sort of like, I don't know, like dissonance there for you?
Oh yeah, no, it's very weird. There's because that's the thing, it looks like it was made in the modern day, which is a testament to what Baz Luhrmann can do as a filmmaker, and and how like he is very willing to embrace new technologies, and it did kind of support the case that to a certain level Faraway Downs was ahead of its time, I guess is what I'll say. Faraway Downs was ahead of its time. It just was a dumb story, and it should never have been called Australia to begin with. Like, it was about something very, very specific, a very specific era, and he tried to find like a romantic sweeping drama to fit around it. Oh, it's a World War II movie, but it's also a social justice story about the lost generation of Aboriginal children, and as a movie, it couldn't juggle all of those different ideas effectively, but it does kind of hold up pretty well as an experience in this form. It kind of reminds me of those Richard Chamberlain sort of miniseries events type of, like, it works better when you have room to breathe, and all of the scope that is like in the cinematography and the mise-en-scène and everything. The outback actually is allowed to look big because you're not just cutting to the next thing every 5 seconds, and sequences are more fleshed out. Like, it's definitely it's amazing that so much could be left on the cutting room floor from a movie, but this was Baz Luhrmann making his movie the way he wanted to make it, as an Australian for Australia, not for a global market, which is funny to think about because now it's even more available to people than Australia was when that movie came out. Anyone with a Hulu account can watch this thing. And honestly, you probably should, like, if you got nothing else better to do, it's just a good throw it on. It's soapy nonsense, and that's always what Australia was. And Faraway Downs, it's really bizarre. You are right. Like, seeing young Hugh Jackman is really strange because he's much more weathered now. And this was back when he was peak hot Hugh Jackman. Nicole Kidman, she's always looked like, she's had mountains of plastic surgery to me. So that's whatever. But like, even like young David Wenham is kind of fun. And then, and then it's like trying to pick out, well, like, who else in this cast is dead now? That's also something you have to think about. But it has the who's who of Australian acting, so it's worth it on that level.
Okay, good.
And you were able to see The Holdovers.
Yeah, I rented this one. It's on VOD now. The new Alexander Payne movie. This is sort of part of my effort to try and catch up with things as we get towards the end of the year here. And this movie is kind of bringing up the tail end of this trend of directors like revisiting a time period of their like childhoods or their teen years in sort of the aftermath of COVID. The first things that come to mind are like Sam Mendes and James Gray both made movies about their childhoods, in the past like 2 years also, or in the past year. And in this particular one, Paul Giamatti plays a like curmudgeonly history teacher at a boarding school who essentially gets the job of staying there over Christmas break to sort of babysit all the kids who can't go home or whose parents don't want them at home. And over the 2 weeks that he's there, he sort of forms a bond with this particularly unruly kid and then the school's cook, who is played by Divine Joy Randolph. And this is pretty basic storyline. I mean, pretty standard stuff here, but it's really well executed. I found it to be. And I think the key to this entire movie is that it's sort of an exercise in restraint, where it's steeped in like 1970s nostalgia, but it doesn't drown in it like something like that last James Gray movie did. Giamatti's performance really skirts the line of making this guy a complete prick, but he's also like strangely likable. And he could have easily turned into a cartoon character. Divine Joy Randolph's character could have easily turned into just she is a mother who is sort of her son died in the Vietnam War, and she's sort of she's having trouble getting over that. And that's sort of one of the main character traits of her character, but it doesn't like dominate it. It doesn't dominate her entire personality. She still is like a fully fleshed out character, and she's not one note. And that's sort of, I mean, Payne knows what he's doing. Alexander Payne knows what he's doing. He's going for something more subtle here. I really enjoyed all the performances in this. I found it to just be a very well executed standard type movie. This is the type of movie that, once all the little kids go to bed on your, your Christmas holiday when you're with your family, you're with your parents, this is the movie that you throw on to watch with your parents, because it's not terribly offensive. It is rated R, but it's mostly for like language and stuff. So there's nothing that's gonna offend anyone's sensibilities, and it's just kind of pure crowd pleaser. Really, really enjoyed it.
A classy affair, very, very much so. And of course it fits with the holiday break theme. So this is a Christmas movie.
Yeah,
effectively.
Exactly.
Yeah, right on. It's also on my watch list. I need to see that, because you need some easy like easy listening equivalents. It's just like slow cinema. But then we also have HBO giving us another mid-season edition of Hard Knocks, with probably the one of the more interesting teams this year. But like, what did you think of it? As because you don't necessarily follow the NFL week to week, so like, what do you get out of watching Hard Knocks?
Well, I find it fascinating from the perspective that this is probably the least sanitized version of the NFL you're ever going to see. And the NFL as an organization is always going to have the final say on what they're going to show and what they're not going to show. And they would never let anything too controversial getting out. But this is probably the least sanitized version we'll ever see. And one of the fascinating things about this is just how the vulgarity on like the sidelines of these NFL games, where everybody is just like, it's funny to watch a NFL game on like CBS or like NBC, because you're not getting any of that. They do their best to like cut the sound out when somebody swears on the field and stuff. But the sidelines are just, and not even just the sidelines, but the team meeting rooms and the practice fields are just like a sea of like vulgarity and like, fuck these fuckers up, like we're gonna get these motherfuckers, and just like and it's with every team. It's with this team. It was with the Jets during the season earlier this year that they did on the Jets, and it's just, I think it's pretty fascinating to get this view into NFL teams.
And especially with a team that, this is actually a team that could go to the Super Bowl, if they get their shit together towards the end of the season. But the most interesting character, going in, and the reason why I was gonna be interested in it was because of Mike McDaniels, because he's just such a dweeb, and he just looks so out of place, with like, he does not look like an NFL head coach. He's wearing like those weird sweatpants, the capris, and he's always like sneakily hitting a vape, while he's doing his thing, and like he's always like dancing along to like the hip hop warm up music, and he is just a platitude machine. Like, but then I guess like that is how you become an NFL head coach. You play the part, and they all kind of follow their own script. They're all reading the same books, trying to like mine it for wisdom and perspective or whatever it is. But then he's also a meme lord deep down, because like he's always just like saying like really bizarre shit, and just to keep people on their toes half the time, it seems like.
Yeah, he's very like, I find him so like diminutive, and he's just constantly like stammering, like tripping over his own words, and when he like is having conversations with players and like trying to sort of get his point across, he's just constantly like nonsensical a lot of the times, where he's like, this is like the if you were a phoenix and you were coming from the ashes, and he's just like constantly like that, and just like nonsensical, and it's hilarious. But at the same time, he's a really, really great head coach. I mean, it's plain to see by how he has turned this team around, and it's pretty fascinating to watch. And yeah, I love the peek into these sort of practice. And it's crazy. The craziest thing about the show is that they turn these episodes over in like 48 hours.
That's it.
It's
it's impressive.
It's nuts.
Yeah. It should not be possible, but that's why Hard Knocks is the best in the business. Like, I think Amazon tried to have their version of it, and it just wasn't as good or interesting, because they just aren't able to get people to be themselves in that way. Because I think everyone else, I don't know, maybe they are all playing for the camera to a degree. You kind of have to, if you know you're going to be on it. Like, there's a famous, because you talk about like sideline vulgarity. Whenever NFL Films has someone mic'd up, like, they always have to be mindful of it. They always have to watch what they're saying. And the best is when they forget, and they're just like cussing each other out or bitching each other out on the sideline. And because then they can't cover it up. They're like, oh fuck, I'm mic'd up. And then it's like, you were mic'd up? Oh shit, yeah man, they're gonna be making clips out of this all day. But it's because
$10,000 fine.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like Tyreek Hill can't like do a backflip and make a fun video with an NFL employee without that dude getting fired, because it's the no fun league. And for a little bit, you understand why it is fun for the guys that do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And time to move on to, I guess, like the featured review. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to really offer much to discuss Godzilla Minus One. I was going to see it last night, and then we had a freak snowstorm, and I was snowbound, and I couldn't go. So Matt is going to kind of take the lead on this one. It's not going to be as long as what we normally do, but what can you tell us about what Takahashi Yamazaki did?
Yeah, so I think good place to start here is every once in a while, a film comes along whose inexplicable popularity sort of restores your faith in the tastes of humanity, if only temporary. And I think about like Mad Max Fury Road, or even like Oppenheimer earlier this year, like billion-dollar movies. Why? Just because for a split second, the public decided to have a sense of taste. And this is where Godzilla Minus One enters. Because right now we have Apple's Monarch series, which continues to be an absolute bore on the small screen. And the entire internet is clowning on the trailer for Godzilla X Kong: A New Empire. And then you have Godzilla Minus One, which is accomplishing such a rare thing pretty quietly at that in theaters. And it's proving that foreign language films can crush at the US box office. It's proving that you can work within the confines of a franchise and still, differentiate yourself. and it's proving that you can indeed have endearing characters in this subgenre in which people often complain about cardboard cutout human protagonists. And this film has accomplished a rare balancing act of making the so-called slow scenes of the movie as compelling as the massive set pieces of destruction. And I found Godzilla Minus One to not only be one of the best Godzilla films, but also one of the best films of 2023. And so, yeah, that's kind of my intro. I don't know if you wanted to cut in with anything, but yeah, what do you have to say?
Well, just that, like, how, like because I see that the director was also credited for doing visual effects to a degree. Like, that's pretty ridiculous in this day and age for a guy like that to also be like, oh no, I'm gonna sit here and do some rendering and some compositing work. But it sounds like some of it was a little janky from what I've heard, but it doesn't matter just because the movie is actually compelling enough and effective enough in other areas.
Yeah, definitely. There is certain scenes where, you can tell that they're working against a budget, certainly. Definitely more like probably like a third of the budget as like, 2014's Godzilla movie, for example.
Which is insane, because Godzilla was barely in that movie to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, it probably just came down to all the actors, I'm assuming, and their salaries. But yeah, there are certainly scenes in this where you can sort of tell that, they're shooting certain stuff at night because it's easier to hide bad effects at night, or they're shooting a lot of stuff in the ocean because when you're shooting Godzilla while he's in the ocean, a lot of times you only have to show like a tail coming out of the water, and that's probably a lot easier to animate than like the full-blown Godzilla body. And so they're doing certain things to work around these things, but it never really is intrusive. You're not thinking about it a lot of the times, because the one thing I will say is the action in this movie really, really goes out of its way to be memorable and to just be like, just have like those like fuck yeah moments where like the first time that Godzilla like powers up and you watch the lights go from his tail to his mouth, and then he breathes his atomic breath and it like shoots out and it causes like a mushroom cloud like 5 miles away. It's incredible.
And another thing that I find interesting is the setting of it, because this is pretty immediately after World War II, like as far as the timeline. So it technically takes place before the original Godzilla is set, as far as years, and like how, like, because they don't have, I don't know, like how does like the actual because it's like an alternate history, like how does that play into it?
Yeah, so to go back to like the characters and just how like memorable they are, the human protagonists who, usually in these types of movies suck. Like I think about like Transformers movies, the more recent King Kong movies, people always complain about these shitty human characters. And in this one, it sort of catches your interest from the get-go, because our main character is a Japanese kamikaze pilot who basically bitched out, and instead of crashing his plane into like a US destroyer, he lands on this tiny island in, right around Japan, and he lands his plane and says that he had like a equipment malfunction, and then the repair people on this island are like, there's nothing wrong with your plane. Why are you here? Why did you not go and die, honorably? And that's sort of where we start. And that makes for a really interesting premise and a really interesting, human protagonist. And that's sort of how they work in World War II. And then that first action scene is of Godzilla basically ripping apart that platoon of like repairmen on this island. And then our protagonist survives, and he's dealing with that guilt of both surviving the Godzilla attack and not crashing his plane. And
Yeah.
he goes home, he goes back to the mainland, and his house is just reduced to rubble, and he has to sort of rebuild his life. And that's kind of where, that's like the first like 15 minutes of the movie.
So
And then
yeah, it's back to Godzilla being intrinsically about the Japanese people, as opposed to we have to have Bryan Cranston playing a scientist, who's on a mission to understand why his wife died. And that makes me happy, because that's what is wrong with the legendary Godzilla movies, in my opinion. They made it too universal, when that original movie was literally just like a cry from the heart, from the Japanese people to the rest of the world. And it's a man in a rubber suit destroying everything, or it's a bunch of CG technology. But when you're just seeking to entertain just for the sake of it, and it doesn't have that depth to it, I'm less interested in it, because it can just be like any of those other gonzo-ass Godzilla movies made over the years that, like, I'm not that big of a fan of that kaiju genre just in principle. Like, I need something meatier to it. And it's so bizarre that a movie so cheap could be made that could not only hold up on every front, but like, be recognized by audiences. Because we had Shin Godzilla didn't come out that long ago, and it only got really appreciated by enthusiasts. But by all accounts, this is it might as well be a mainstream success in the American market at any rate.
Yeah, it's doing incredibly well. And this is one of those rare movies that is going to have a better second week in theaters than first week, which is like unprecedented, purely because of word of mouth. I mean, even when I saw it last week, there was probably 20 other people in the theater, which I was really surprised to see. And they just expanded it to 2,500 theaters across the US. And their initial plan was to basically just shelve this thing after a week. Like, they were gonna put it out in theaters for a week and just say, okay, all the nerds who are gonna go see it are gonna go see it, and then we're dumping it. We got to make room for Aquaman and Wonka and all that shit. And so but they kept it because it's doing so well, and they expanded it even. And so I'm very interested to know, like, what people's, it's like, why this one in particular, why didn't Shin Godzilla make a big splash? Why is it in particular this one? I don't know if it's just because people are starved for like blockbusters, because it's December, and this is typically a pretty big time for blockbusters, and the only thing we have coming out is Aquaman, and I'm sure a lot of people are down on that movie. And so I don't know if people just want to go see something big and they want to see spectacle, but yeah, I'm not sure.
I think spectacle is it, because this obviously has it, but it has clarity to its vision, just comparing trailers, because that's all I have to go on. But that new Godzilla X Kong, it's so incomprehensible. I couldn't tell you what was happening in that movie, except for the fact that Baby Kong exists. That's really all I know. And with this, instead, you like, I don't know, the shots that I'm seeing, of like trains and boats getting chucked into skyscrapers, like, it doesn't take much to like actually have things be like comprehensible and and have some clarity to it. And if anything, I think that might be like a quality that is making it stick a little bit more, because you can watch a trailer for that and be like, oh, I know exactly what's happening. It's in the day. There's Godzilla with a white background behind him instead of like a sea of black and brown, and it's just commendable. And I just wish I could have seen it last night. That would have made everything a lot better for me to be able to.
One of the things that they really succeed in doing is this movie makes Godzilla scary again. And in my opinion, I was kind of asking myself, like, how is this movie accomplishing this? Why am I sitting here in this like theater seat, like, clenching my jaw and just like, wincing almost at, wanting to look away. And it's because this Godzilla is so like otherworldly almost, and its movements, it's combining styles of Godzilla's where, you know in one scene this Godzilla is sort of calling back to the old style Godzillas where its movements are very jerky and its arms are like locked on it at its sides like a T-Rex, and there's no humanity in its eyes whatsoever. It's got the dead eyes, and you can't reason with it. You can't, talk to it. You can't do anything. And then suddenly out of nowhere, it powers up, and it's more like the contemporary, versions of Godzilla where it's moving really fast and agile, and it's swinging its tail, and it's like shooting atomic breath like miles away. And so it's this weird, almost nonsensical version of how this thing is moving and how this thing is behaving. And it's like, if you get this thing in water, if you are unlucky enough to encounter this thing in the ocean, you are fucked. Like,
Yeah.
you are just fucked. And that's kind of one of the things they hammer home. There's a lot of really good water-based action scenes in this movie, which, especially the American versions of Godzilla don't really partake in. It's always in a city on land, and this movie really, really does the sort of how fast Godzilla is in water really well.
And when Americans make it, like in Godzilla vs. Kong, they have to find an excuse to get Godzilla and Kong on a aircraft carrier so they can have a boxing match. Because, so this makes a lot more sense. It's like, why would he ever get out of the water?
Yeah. Definitely.
Golly.
So, and one of the things, as I kind of bring it home here, there is one thing I did want to touch on, and it's probably my only complaint with the movie. And I'm not even sure it's necessarily a complaint. It's just something that I noticed as like a American viewer, and that is the acting. And there are some scenes in this movie where you're as sort of a American audience member who's more used to, a little bit more subtle, a little bit more realistic acting. There are scenes in this film where there are characters that are literally like, they are so racked with grief that they are throwing themselves on the ground, and they're constantly bowing, and they are, like just stricken with grief. And there are facial expressions in this movie that come straight out of like a Japanese anime. And the way that I kind of wanted to incorporate you into this conversation is I want to know if the popularity of anime in the more recent years has had a detrimental effect on live action Japanese acting.
And that's a good question, because a part of me, and I don't know if this is just because of anime itself that I have this perception, but I know from watching some, Japanese films over the years from different decades, that kind of like where they just get really loud and they just yell at the same volume and their actions are really exaggerated. That's something I kind of associate with Japanese, like performance anyway. But it might just be even more exaggerated because of anime's influence. Like, I don't deny that that's probably a thing. But, like, I don't know, with Korean cinema especially, you see that kind of quality too. Like, where, I don't know, it might just be something with that part of the world to a degree. Mm-hmm. But when I watch this movie myself, I might have a better understanding of, like, where the comment is coming from. But I totally, like, when I saw it in the doc, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, I could totally understand that. Because, yeah, like, a lot of people in Japan probably watch a lot more anime than they watch movies.
For sure.
For sure. And and if you're an actor, that probably does influence it, because the way that voice acting works, and especially in that genre, it already, kind of tailors itself to being a little excessive. So, I don't know. Maybe it's something they need to check themselves on, because it might get in the way of, some of the qualities that are required, when you're acting, like subtlety.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't even necessarily want to frame it completely as a negative thing, because I think part of it is just sort of a cultural difference. But that you definitely notice it, like when you're sitting there in the theater and a character literally like throws themselves on the ground and like hides their face in their hands and just like hysterically cries. And so it's just kind of something I noticed. But yeah, definitely don't want to end on that point.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of just say, to sort of wrap this up, yeah, I mean, wholeheartedly I can recommend this. Like I said, this, in a couple weeks when we do our best of 2023 episode or segment or whatever it ends up being, this undoubtedly will land on my top films of the year. See it in theaters while you still can. I don't know if it will last more than another week, hopefully, but yeah, definitely wholeheartedly recommend.
So one last question for you.
Yeah.
Would this be a great double feature with Oppenheimer?
Yeah, that's interesting, because yeah, this same week that this comes out, I don't know if you saw this, but it was announced that Oppenheimer is getting a Japanese theatrical release this week, coming up. And so theoretically, if you lived in Japan, you could see this and you could see Oppenheimer in the same day. And so it makes for, I think, an interesting watch, because as you pointed out earlier, this version of Godzilla is, much more tied to World War II. It's much more tied to the dropping of the atomic bomb. That stuff is constantly in the back of your mind when you're watching this particular film. And so, yeah, it is almost like Japan's weird answer to Oppenheimer this year. And so, yeah, I would say so. Yeah, definitely could make a double feature.
Because I heard some chatter too that there was like that people were kind of put off by the idea that like former Imperial Japanese Navy and Army people getting brought back out, because from what I understand, our government just kind of says, this is your fucking problem, Japan. It just kind of says you can have an army and navy again, which is pretty hilarious. But like they kind of have like there's heroism, and maybe that might be something that is appealing to people, and because it kind of seems like it's unabashedly just there's pride involved,
Yes.
even and that's I think that's always commendable if it's for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to the mentionables. You had a very fun comic to read from this from what the images that I came across.
Yeah, so my mentionable this week, we're in December, we're in the midst of the Christmas season, and so the mentionable is Batman, Santa Claus, Silent Night. And this is a comic that came out last week. It's written by Jeff Parker and drawn by Michelle Bandini. And I'm always kind of surprised when these Halloween-themed mini-series don't turn out to be like a lame cash grab or like just like filler. And that's kind of the case here, because this is a mini-series that is going to be released one issue a week for the next 4 weeks. And it supposes that Santa Claus was one of Bruce Wayne's mentors when he was younger. And it also supposes that Santa Claus is an ancient Viking who has come to Gotham to hunt vampires. And so, it's pretty
metal.
wild. It's pretty cool. And yeah, it's kind of, it's a B plot. It's a B movie plot, and it's kind of just one of those fun, very actiony comics, but it's awesome. It'll get you in the mood for the season. And it's, actually pretty well written for what it is. And I'm always down for a DC story that involves Zatanna, because this is,
I was gonna ask about that.
This is a modern DC story that involves Zatanna, who is one of my favorite DC characters, and she is a criminally underused character in modern DC comics, and she factors into the story pretty majorly. And so that's kind of where I'll leave it. But yeah, I can wholeheartedly recommend this. If you're gonna, go to your comic shop sometime in the next month, maybe you're picking up a Christmas gift for yourself or someone else, check this out because it's going to be on the shelves.
Right on, right on. I was going to talk about it for my mentionable, a YouTuber that I was having a lot of fun with called Podcast Cringe, whose sole purpose was to take down the like Joe Rogan, brat pack of podcasters for like the losers and assholes that they are. But then he really started getting old, and then something else popped up, which was the Dick Mullen from Cumtown fame has a new YouTube comedy special that came out called Year of the Dragon that reminded me why I loved this guy and like his whole sensibility. He's a misanthrope, he's a degenerate, he's all of the things that like, I love in a comedian, but he doesn't apologize for it. He doesn't act like all of his weirdness and vices are a bad thing, and he doesn't care what you think, like legitimately doesn't care what you think. Because he's like the same ilk as Tim Dillon. In fact, they used to be friends when Tim Dillon like lived in New York still, and now that they've gone their separate ways, and Stavros Halkias has gone separate ways, and Cumtown is no more. The Adam Friedland show is all well and good, but I still needed more, and this is the more that like I've been waiting for, and I'm just happy that the guy went and did a special that was worth watching and listening to.
Yeah, is this I'm vaguely familiar with Cumtown and those people, but is this like a, because I'm just watching the video that you're putting up here.
This is just a trailer. This is just the like,
okay.
Yeah, the actual.
So does he just sit? Does he just like sit in like a, like how is this framed as like a comedy special? Is it just him like telling stories or what?
Yeah, he actually has an audience. Like it's a proper special. It's in a room.
Sure.
It's an intimate setting, and again, there are people in the room with him. But this was just the video that they used to promote it, to be like, hey, we're doing this. Hassan Piker, you need to give us money. Like that kind of thing. And yeah. So this was just like the announcement that he was doing it. It's in the same room, which I think is it's like in the same studio. So they might have just filled it with his friends and family anyway. But it's a proper, I'm man at a mic on a stage telling jokes. And so yeah, it's not just what is playing right now. This was the only clip I could find short enough to, promote it. But yeah, everyone gets a T-shirt if you said Hezbollah something, I forget. Yeah, first million views, everyone gets a T-shirt, Hezbollah T-shirt. God, yeah, but that's the kind of guy he is, and that's what I'm about. So that tells you something about me. But everyone should go out and see Godzilla Minus One. I need to see it myself. And next week is going to be another mini-sode. And what is it going to be about?
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing a mini-sode on the sort of Christmas movies for your holiday season that are, unexpected, or sort of movies that you don't necessarily associate with Christmas on their face, but maybe you do because of nostalgia, or maybe you do because of the feeling it gives you, or something like that. So that's what I'll be doing next week.
Looking forward to see what fits the bill for that. Thank you once again for, watching, and thank you, Matt, for joining me. And we'll see you all next week.
Yep. See ya.